The title of this talk is What a Heart Doctor Hears When He Listens to the Heart of Healthcare. Introduction. I'm Dr. Jonathan Fisher, a clinical cardiologist, mindfulness meditation teacher, and organizational well-being and resiliency leader at Novant Health for a team of 38,000. Through the power of a realistic reenactment, I'll offer a glimpse at what it might be like to be frightened about a possible heart attack while being treated by a doctor who is disengaged. I'll then share my own personal story as a cardiologist caring for patients for 2 decades and the shifts in empathy I've noticed in myself. I'll describe a journey of lost empathy, inability to listen to even my own voice, and inability to listen properly to my patients. I'll then share my story of cultivating self-compassion and listening as a means to restoring my connection with myself, my patients, and my colleagues. I'll discuss my discovery that mindfulness has a lot to say about communication and how I learned that information alone does not heal hearts or people. Finally, I'll present a potential path for all of us to learn to listen more deeply to each other so the heart of healthcare can be protected. Part 1. A potential space. There is a space at the center of healthcare, a space where 2 hearts beat, yours and your doctor's. As a clinical cardiologist, I have carefully examined tens of thousands of hearts over the past 20 years, including my own. And I'm here today because this space and our 2 hearts are in danger. Imagine the following. Over the past 6 weeks, you have been noticing a tightness in your chest. Heart disease runs in your family. You start thinking, what if I have a heart attack? Can I afford the treatment? Am I going to die young? The worries spiral, and you make an appointment with a cardiologist. He walks into the room and apologizes for running late. He seems distracted, frustrated by something that happened moments earlier. He asks you what's wrong, and as you speak, you notice he is scanning the computer screen in front of him, clicking and typing. He seems disconnected, going through the motions. You feel rushed, frustrated, and uneasy. He recommends and briefly explains a stress test and prescribes 2 new medications. He advises you go to the emergency room if your symptoms get worse. He leaves the room, moving on to his next patient. You feel terrified and alone. Watching this scene, most of us see a patient in need. Some see a doctor who has lost his way. Others see missed opportunities and potential harm. For years, I was this doctor. And now, I see something different. I see the emotional space between patient and doctor. I see so much potential for deep connection and for real healing. But more and more, I have seen a space filled with fear, uncertainty, and shared loneliness. Let's examine these 2 hearts. Let's explore this space, and maybe together we will discover a prescription for hope. Part 2. Danger. As patients, more than 60% of our visits to doctors are for stress-related conditions. We are suffering from insomnia, headaches, fatigue, back pain, stomach upset, obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, and the list goes on. We are anxious, afraid, and uncertain. As physicians, we are physically and emotionally exhausted. We feel cynical and disconnected from you, our patients. More than half of physicians in the United States feel disempowered, disrespected, demoralized, and disconnected. We are burned out by a system that has failed to value the space between us. Right now, 1 in 4 of us are actively planning to cut back our hours, to leave medicine, or to retire early. And we are killing ourselves at a rate higher than any other profession and twice the rate of the general population, 400 deaths per year by suicide. Families and friends are not the only ones affected. Research shows that your burned out providers are more than twice as likely to make a major medical error. We are more likely to perform unnecessary tests, to refer you to other doctors, and to increase your medical costs. But the problem begins long before we enter the exam room. Our medical training systematically requires that we ignore our basic physical and emotional needs. We are explicitly and implicitly taught not to ask for help. We tell ourselves that painful emotions and insecurities are signs of weakness. We tell ourselves that they impair our judgment and prevent objectivity. We are trained to silence and suppress our sadness, grief, regret, guilt, and shame. And in the process, we also become numb to joy, gratitude, hope, compassion, and intimacy. We end up closed off from our own feelings and from yours. And then there are the national, corporate, and organizational policies that disregard our basic human need for connection. Today, on average, doctors spend 37% of the allotted 15-minute visit with you clicking and typing required computer data. For 10 years of my own practice, I felt anxious, alone, and helpless. And also putting up a facade and trying to hide it from everyone was exhausting. I felt like I had missed out on my own life. I had missed out on so many moments of potential connection with my patients, my friends, and my family. I was just going through the motions. When I was a teenager, I first dreamed of becoming a doctor like my father, but it would take 30 years before I found the joy, meaning, and connection I was yearning for. I first needed to discover a space within myself. Part 3. No space. I grew up in a home where there was just one larger-than-life photograph on the living room wall. Though I was the youngest of 7 children, all of whom later went on to become physicians, it wasn't a family member. It was Albert Einstein. One of the greatest minds that ever lived literally looked over me through the years of my childhood. He's still there today. My father, the town doctor, and my mother, a nuclear physicist, placed a strong emphasis on intellectual achievement and serving others. No pressure. You can imagine how a B+ went over. There wasn't much talk of personal feelings or needs. I learned that sacrifice and academic achievement were more important than personal well-being or happiness. So I practiced ignoring or escaping my insecurities, my loneliness, and my anger. I practiced hiding behind a facade of competence, achievement, and posed perfection. I soon found myself trapped in my own mind. It was filled with harsh self-judgment and an overarching feeling of unworthiness. Becoming a doctor would allow me to feel needed, to connect deeply with others, and to reduce suffering in the world. Years went by of sleepless on-call nights, delayed gratification, and missed time with my friends and my family. I felt burdened by the heavy weight of responsibility for others' lives and deaths. The joy, meaning, and connection I had been called to by the practice of medicine was a distant, fading dream. In 2001, during my last year of medicine residency training, I reached what I then believed was my lowest point. My best friend, Andrea, who through the years had offered me unconditional love and nurturing, shared with me one piece of advice. 5 simple words would soon change the course of my life. She told me, "Jonathan, be kind to yourself." Her words hammered the first crack in the wall I had built around my heart. They provided me with a revolutionary new way to relate to myself, to my life, and to my patients. 5 years later, Andrea mentioned that she was seeing the eye doctor again because her blurry vision wasn't going away and was affecting her practice as a radiologist. A few weeks after that, she was the first to see the image of a tumor the size of a golf ball growing in the center of her brain, buried out of reach of any surgeon's grasp. I sank into despair. Andrea had been my steadiest source of support, solace, and hope. Then, after 4 years of radiation treatments and experimental chemotherapy, she was gone. Andrea wasn't just my best friend. She was also my sister. By that time, I was married with 2 children under the age of 5 and 5 years into my new cardiology practice. Behind my white coat and professional courtesies, I was sad, afraid, angry, and alone. My family and my patients were not getting the best of me. I had no space in my mind or in my heart for calm, clarity, or connection. In my practice, sleepless nights caring for critically ill patients flowed into overfilled clinic schedules with too little time to connect with those I had been called to serve. And then came the monthly corporate performance scorecards and productivity metrics reports. These served to remind me that despite feeling as though I had no more to give of myself, I was being judged as less valuable than my more productive colleagues. I had lost my identity as a caring, competent doctor, as a loving husband and friend, as a nurturing father. I had lost my sense of self-worth. I had lost my joy for living. I was ready to leave medicine. I felt as though I had been missing out on my own life. Part 4. Space. In 2009, I searched the phrase, "How can I be happy again?" on the internet. This began my journey of healing. I dove deep into the science of positive psychology and the practices of meditation, mindfulness, and yoga. I slowly began to feel alive in my own body. I began to reconnect with my core values, curiosity, kindness, and connection. I began to acknowledge and to nurture past wounds, and I began writing the story of my own life. I discovered the space inside my mind that exists between every stimulus and response. Practicing mindful awareness, I began to notice an expanding space between my pain and my self-defeating impulse to numb out or escape. This space saved my life. Once I began to loosen the shackles of my storytelling mind, my heart called out for attention. I began to learn how to heal my heart with the scientifically supported practices of self-compassion and loving kindness. I practiced recognizing and taming the self-critical voice in my head. I learned to accept myself and my life as it is without needing to change anything, without needing to be perfect. I began to allow myself just to be human, vulnerable, and whole. During my darkest moments, I was guided by the echoes of Andrea's loving voice. "Jonathan, be kind to yourself." By nurturing my own heart's broken parts with patience and care, I gradually learned to love myself. This internal shift allowed me to really hear and to really love others, my patients, my family, my friends, for the first time in my life, to really love. I slowly became comfortable sharing my own stories of pain and loss and healing. I soon noticed something that was both comforting and unsettling. I was not alone. My colleagues, intelligent, dedicated, and resilient doctors, nurses, and other providers were silently suffering. They felt crushed by the burden of growing patient loads, time-consuming clerical tasks, disabling time constraints, and preventable distractions. They were suffering from a lost sense of purpose and lost human connections, a kind of loneliness in the midst of others. In 2017, I committed to helping change the way we practice medicine, starting within Novant Health, a 4-state integrated healthcare system, including 15 medical centers, 580 clinics, more than 1,500 physicians, and 38,000 employees. I began to speak out about the twin crises of patient alienation and provider burnout, about the interplay between internal and external threats to our basic human needs for safety, satisfaction, and emotional support. I joined teams of doctors, nurses, and leaders to help transform the organizational processes that impede rather than support humane healthcare delivery. And I helped design and facilitate interactive training sessions, sharing the evidence-based practices of mindfulness, self-compassion, and empathic communication rooted in deep listening. These skills are not ends in themselves. They are tools that help patients, providers, and healthcare leaders move past our own self-centered narratives and reconnect with ourselves and with others. With these authentic connections, we can then come together to positively transform the delivery of health care. There are still many obstacles along our path. Part 5. More danger. Countless competing interests are standing squarely in the space between us. Healthcare organizations, government agencies, tech giants, pharmaceutical companies, private insurers, and other third parties are all right there in the room. They promise that big data, wearable technology, telemedicine, and artificial intelligence will efficiently connect patients, diagnoses, treatments, and providers. I firmly believe that these mega trends in healthcare will improve access to care, efficiency, cost savings, and outcomes. And I believe that when we lose focus on the heart of medicine, we pay a much higher price. As patients, our unacknowledged emotional stress drives maladaptive health behaviors. These lead to preventable diseases that account for $1 trillion of our $3.5 trillion annual healthcare spending. As doctors, our overlooked feelings of overwhelm and demoralization are driving our exodus from the practice of medicine. Current data predict a shortage of 120,000 physicians by 2030. The crisis of burnout, if left unaddressed, will continue to drive unnecessary testing and referrals, inefficient care delivery, missed patient opportunities, and major medical errors. These factors account for over $500 billion of wasted healthcare spending annually. I believe that presence, empathy, and kindness are the only effective foundations for trusting, healing, and nurturing relationships. I believe that empathy and kindness are the only real remedy for suffering. There is no app for empathy and no AI algorithm for love. Part 6. Protect. So, is it too late, as many are saying, to revive the heart of healthcare? Is it too late to preserve the analog qualities of empathy and compassion in the increasingly digital space between us? The answer depends on our own answers to the following questions. Providers, are we ready to create a new culture in medicine, one that values self-care, emotional openness, and communal support? Are we willing to protect and fulfill our role in the world as exemplars and standard bearers for compassionate care? Patients, are we ready to care for our own deepest needs? Are we ready to help create a healthcare system that allows us to be heard and understood? Healthcare leaders and policymakers, are we ready to empower physicians and patients to co-design the processes of their own care? Corporate leaders, entrepreneurs, and engineers, as you dream and create your vision of our high-tech healthcare future, will you honor and remember what it's like to be ill, or afraid, or uncertain, as we stumble through life in these vulnerable bodies and minds? Will you honor and remember our deepest and most human healthcare need? Our need for a caring, therapeutic, human relationship. Well, what would happen if we all shared our values and our vision to shape our evolving spaces of healing and support? Prioritizing the vital space between us will unify doctors, patients, healthcare, and industry leaders towards a common goal, drawing us together, out from our own separate corners of concern. Together we might each discover a new space within us and between us, a space of unimaginable potential for healing and human flourishing. So, cherish and protect the space between us. Keep it safe, and it may still be there when we need it most. We can all start by being kind to ourselves and to each other. Thank you.